thread a needle 52 times. That's just for the legs. And so I said, I sat one day and I went to bed so frustrated I couldn't do it. And I said to the Lord, I talked to him out of the window. He's out on the ocean.
Yeah.
And I said, my days of making Charlie are over. I said, I can't thread a needle and I'm not going to have somebody on standby just to thread needles for me. So I spent one day and I spent the next day, and by the time Anthony I got to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was really frustrated.
Would have liked to have come in that day.
I got the piece of wool in this hand, and every time I went to see, I can't see, I haven't got any eyesight much left, although I read all the time, but I had to feel where the eye was, and I had to feel the wool here, and I couldn't make the wool go into the eye. And so I pulled it right out so that you couldn't see any wool there at all. And I pressed it so hard together, and I felt where the needle eye was here. And I put it over there, and I just rested my fingers for a minute, and I thought, well, you should go there, you little bugger. Anyhow, I just eased it a bit at a time. And there it was.
Jeez.
After 2 days. So I said to the kids...
I would have given up.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, everybody would give up. But
Not you.
Except Stephen and me.
Yeah.
But I said to the children, now, don't you think that's exciting? I weren't quite sure about that. Well, I said, if you couldn't thread a needle and you find you could. So I said, I took it out, and I thought it was a fluke. And I tried it again, exactly the same way, out straight away. And
you can actually get a needle threader the other day. A lady bought
you
one.
can't get a needle threader for wool.
Oh no.
It's too thick.
Yeah, no, she had this thing and she
Yeah.
put the needle in there
Yeah.
and she put the cotton down there and she clicked a little thing at the side and then...
Yeah,
boom.
I've got one of them.
Yeah.
But you cannot do it for wool.
No.
So don't you think that was exciting for
Oh,
It
that?
was very exciting.
Well, I thought it was because I tried for 2 days
Yeah.
and couldn't do it. So now Doreen's here and she says, Rita, I can't thread. I said, do it the way I tell you. She said, no, you thread it for me. And everybody sends their needles for me to thread now. Did you ever hear anything as silly?
No, I've never heard anything that silly, no.
Anyway, the minister was here today and he said, Rita, that's going to be one of my sermons.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great.
There it is. Which church is he from?
Uniting.
Oh, yeah.
Brian Gilbert.
I think I might have met him actually.
He's a lovely man.
Sometimes I give talks at
Well,
the churches.
Anthony, if you'd have met him, you'd never forget him because he's Mr. Bean.
Is he?
Yeah.
Does he have a little teddy?
No, he has the same mannerisms, and I nearly burst out laughing often, and I got to control myself, and I do. But that's the exciting bit about that. But if you look for things, you'll find something exciting in every day.
Oh, you can do, yeah. Actually, it was interesting because there's a great show on TV, and it's a bit too late for us, and it was trying to make Australia a happier place. And it's on the ABC, it's on a Monday night, and it's on about 8:30. And it's on ABC 1, I think it is, because you've got to be careful, because we watched 2 weeks ago and put the ABC 2 on and missed it.
Yeah.
We kept waiting for it to start.
Yes, that's a bit of a nuisance. Isn't
It is if you don't know the channel it's going to be on. So anyway, I missed it, and then I missed the gist of what it was all about. But interestingly enough, I always put the ABC radio on. So I had ABC Classical, and what the hell's her name there? Margaret Throsby.
Oh, yes.
She's
yes,
brilliant,
yes.
is Margaret
Yes,
Scott.
she is.
She is just a brilliant
Yeah.
woman. And anyway, she was interviewing, and the guy she interviewed, his name was Anthony Grant. And Anthony Grant was born in England, and he came out here as a tradesman, and he was living in Sydney. And he worked until he was in his late 30s, and decided he would go back to university. And it was a hard thing to do, he says, because I left school when I was 14 and a half. So you can imagine going back to university at that age, and he's become a professor of psychiatry. Can you believe it? So he's put together this series, and it's going for a few more weeks, and he's taken I think it's 10 people, and he's helping them, and they all say they suffer from forms of depression and happiness. So each one of them has their own problems which they have to overcome. And he was saying on the ABC, which he doesn't say on the television, where you can get forms of unhappiness and depression, and sometimes it's not being able to create something where you can fulfill something in a day which
Or
makes you
thread a
happy,
needle.
or thread a needle, or a similar type of thing, yeah. And one of the guys, he's always depressed because the simple reason is he likes to spend money, but he can't save, and so now he's got this debt around his neck of tens of thousands of dollars. So last night on the TV show, he's admitted that he wants to fix that up. So they've got a guy who just specialises in, fixing debt. And quite often what they do is they put all your debt into one basket.
That's right. Yeah.
Rather than be paying bills here, there and everywhere.
Yeah.
They make you cut up all your bloody credit cards, all your bank cards, and just have the one thing. And then they say, well, how much can you pay? And that's how much you'll have to pay. And he'll have to pay it every week, without fail. And
It's
so
the only way.
And so anyway, that was his thing for that guy. And then there was another lady, and she just sits in a room and she has no outside contact. And anyway, there's these 10. And when there was on the show, they haven't told you this because if they told you the end of the story, it'd be no good, would it? But he was just saying that all of them have gone forward, which is a great thing. And he says, I've gone back to see them 24 weeks later. And he says, and all of them are still going forward. None of them have turned back. So he says it's been great.
Oh.
But some of the things that they've had to do with these people is they had to take them into a karaoke bar. And you imagine that you suffer from stress or nervous tension or depression, and to sing, I mean, it'd be hard enough. And the guy who's taking him out, he says, I want all of you to explain how you feel and where do you feel it now. Oh, he says, I feel it in the stomach. I feel like I want to be sick. He says, you got butterflies in your stomach. And he says, and what about you and blah, blah, blah. He says, well, look, I want you to just get beyond that, think beyond that. I want you to think positive. And one of the things that we're saying, and that's what this guy says on the show, he says, is getting people to be about positive things in their life. He says, if you've got a lot of negativity about yourself and you've come from a family where you've always been put down or given negative responses, the likelihood is you'll have no self-confidence as you go through life. And that must be a terrible thing here, because for you who's done so much and you've been able to tackle so many varied things, because you haven't just done one thing or another thing, you've done so many things, so your confidence would have been a lot higher. But for some of these people, I know
They've done nothing.
Yeah. And I used to find that in the classroom when I was a kid at school, I was really bright and I could sing. But the trouble is I couldn't retain the information. I could work on it while I knew it.
You could have
Learned to it.
learned to.
Yeah. But for things that I had genuine interest in, I did. But for a lot of stuff which I didn't have genuine interest, it was only interesting while I was listening to it. And then when I walked out of the classroom, I shut the door, I left it there in the classroom.
That's what a lot of people do, and
You see.
and that's the worst thing you
But there's
can
some
do.
people sit in the classroom and can't see any reason for it. And they don't even absorb it in the classroom. They don't absorb it when they even leave the classroom.
Anyhow, what did you do?
So anyway, the show's still going. He did go back out, like I said, 24 weeks later to see him. They're all doing something positive.
Yeah.
But the part of these things each week is he's giving them new tests to do.
Yeah.
New tests to build up their confidence.
Yeah.
And to see how they go. So there was I think they've done some tests between each one of them about different things, they did that, like I said, they had that karaoke test, like, and then they went to another bar, and they had to be comedians, so they had to go and tell jokes. So the best jokes that they told, most of them, was jokes about their own life, about silly things that they did.
Yes.
And so they did, and actually people was laughing and
It's
clapping.
exciting.
It is, and you can see how
It's
the confidence is
exciting.
building in each one of them.
Yes.
And
yes.
one of them, he says, I never leave my room. He says, I don't go outside, and I wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't want to do that.
No.
Yeah, no.
They don't know how exciting being positive can be.
But isn't it funny in all our lives, even yourself or even yourself, Rita? You know, there'll have been something in your life at some stage you thought, I'm not pretty enough, or I'm too big.
Well, I thought I was the size of an elephant.
There
My
you
family
go.
made that.
Yeah, you see, there you go. And then all of a sudden, at some stage in your life, you realise, what the hell was they on about? And what was I thinking? That wasn't me anyway.
No.
But they made me feel that way.
Yes. I was
But you can look at you on there,
Yes.
and you hardly look like an elephant. They look like a
No,
princess
well,
on that
that was the days that they told me.
one. Oh, you see, you can't imagine that, can you?
And they used to tell me that I was the ugly one of the family.
Jeez.
And
that sticks, doesn't it?
But they said you can't have brains and be pretty as well.
See, what did you ever cop anything?
Oh, well, yeah, I've been through similar things, yeah, but I've coped now. Just wasted life, that's all.
It does. You
I've
feel so
wasted
stupid,
life.
eh?
Yes.
I've wasted
And there's no
life.
necessity
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
I must admit, I don't want to make this sound bad, because my wife was a good wife, you know, when I was married.
Yeah.
And she looked after me, and she did the washing, and that house used to be spotless.
Yeah.
And when I came on, I could go in the pitch black and go in my top drawer and get a pair of underpants and go in the second drawer, and there they go again. Remember, I lost them last week. and we couldn't find my keys anywhere.
Yeah.
They'd gone down the side of the...
Yeah.
And there was always a clean pair of
Yeah.
socks. All the washing was done, the sheets was clean, the place was clean, my dinner was on the table. So from a wife's aspect, if that was the
I
expectation...
wasn't a good wife like that.
No, but
Yeah.
the fact was, she was so damn good like that in doing all those things for me, you know, like, and that was a good aspect of the married life. But as far as being a good friend, we wasn't good friends.
No,
No.
You know, like
Yeah.
we could put up with one another.
No.
Yeah, no, and there's no problem about
I know.
that.
Well,
And we
that's
could go
right.
out together.
Yeah.
But as far as seeing eye to eye, forget about it. We never saw eye to eye on anything. Nothing.
Well, you see, that you're not compatible.
You see, I'd protect her, and she'd protect me. Don't get me wrong. If
Oh,
another woman had come
yeah.
near me, she would have scratched her eyes out, and
Yeah.
you know, like that type of thing. But as far as getting along together, oh,
And that's so sad.
well, you see, you know, after losing her and then feeling that I could never live without her again, you know, at first, and then realising she'd moved on and she'd found someone else, to see her happy, first of all, I felt bad about myself, because I felt, well, she's finally found someone who makes her happy, and I thought, well, that's funny. He's short and he's runty, and he's older than her, and I thought, well, what does she see in him? But you see, for him, I suppose she'll be everything.
It's from here.
Yeah. Yeah, she needed to have that, someone telling her constantly that she was beautiful and how much she loved her and everything like that. And I never did it. I didn't do it enough anyway, should I say. Anyway, I
yeah,
better...
but she was clever
Listen,
too.
how did you get on with that?
Well, they rang me up before, and they've asked me, can I pop back in again? So that's what I'll have to do.
Yeah. No, well,
We've got to start this story
Yeah,
very
well,
soon,
if you don't start it
darling.
now, you'll never start it.
Otherwise, you'll
we
never
didn't
get
even
it.
get a cup of coffee.
Ah, the place that...
It's going to the dogs, like. It's
See,
going to the dogs.
What did I see the other day? I saw a lady, a friend of yours, down at Golden Beach.
I know.
Roz?
Helen Cooper.
Yeah, that's her. Cooper. Yeah,
Yeah.
Helen Cooper.
Yeah.
Oh,
Be
Yeah.
careful, it's on camera.
it's
it?
not.
Oh, it is.
It is. We don't want to talk about anybody, sweetheart.
Oh,
No.
okay.
All right.
All right then. See you then.
Ta-da, love.
Bye bye bye.
Have
Oh,
you got
and
that
just give us a
going
call
on?
when you're ready.
Yeah. Eh?
Give us a call after Christmas.
Yeah, all right, I will. Thank you, love.
Not falling off the bed, all right.
No, okay. Unless you're with me.
I'll catch you.
Have you got to turn
Yeah.
on all that time?
Yeah. I can always cut out the bits I don't want. Anyway. No, I just want it to get started.
Okay.
All right. You start
Well-
when you're ready.
This is just going to be a few stories from the aerial ambulance. I've told them before, and I may forget parts of it, but you'll have to forgive me for that. But one day, Laurie and Les were sitting in the office, and they got a call from a man who had been very, very badly burnt in. Oh, well, we didn't know at the time that it was to 80% of his body. And remember, this is about 50 or 60 years ago, and it wasn't usual for, when Laurie came back to the ambulance, he said, there's no hope of this man living at all. But he said, I've done my best. And when he got to the site, they found that his camp and everything had been burnt out, and he had knocked over a kerosene lamp, and it had it went into flames, and everything was burning together. And there was a man that rode along, not too or only within minutes of it, really. And he rode on to see if he could get medical help. So they got on to Les and the aerial ambulance, and either Les or Laurie went out on every case that was serious. They wouldn't ask anyone to do a case if they could do it themselves, if it was very serious. So when Laurie got to this camp, he was this man with 3rd-degree burns to most of his body, and 2nd-degree burns and 1st-degree burns. And Laurie looked at him and shook his head. He said, there's no way in the world I can do anything for this man, and yet I've got to try. So he knew it was a burn, and he had extra equipment to deal with burns, and he bandaged that man's body from his head. It was the tip of his head, just leaving his eyes and mouth and nose out. And he bandaged him with 3-inch bandages from his head to his toe. Anyway, they couldn't come back that night because it was after 6, and DCA would never let them pilot after 6. They did not have the equipment to do it. And about 4 o'clock the next morning, they got into the plane, and Laurie said to the pilot, as fast as you can get there, son. So if I remember rightly, it was John Duffy that was the pilot that time, and he took him into the hospital, and he said to Dr. Flynn, who was really a cousin to Dr. John Flynn of the Inland, and he said to Dr. Flynn, I have brought him in, but you haven't got not one hope of saving his life. Anyway, Laurie never followed it up, and when it was about 10 months later, and an old chap came into the Cairns ambulance, and he says, I want to see that there Laurie Howard. So the boys called Laurie out, and he said, you don't recognise me, do you? And Laurie said, should I? And he said, should you? He said, you bandaged me up from head to toe. And he said, you didn't know that I heard, but I heard you say that I didn't have a hope in hell of living. And he said, when you came, and just what you did to me made me feel so much better. And then when I was brought into the hospital, he said, you still told Dr. Flynn that you didn't think I would pull through. And Laurie said, you're not, and I have an idea his name was Oldfield. I wouldn't be certain on that point though. And he said, I don't believe it. He said, I haven't even heard about you. They haven't even spoken to me in the hospital of how you were getting on. And here you are, absolutely on your feet. And this man, by the way, was 82 years old. And so that was just one little thing of the aerial ambulance. And then another time there was it was after the 1948 cyclone, and it was after the first plane had gone down, and Laurie had been in that plane accident. And they said that there was a man, he was only about 21, and he was a stockman, and he had a compound fracture of his ankle, and it had been either 2 or 3 days without any attention at all. And they said that gangrene was just outside the door. And so Laurie, how he came to be out there, we had no plane of our own at all. And Les and Laurie were at their wits' end because it was against their principles ever to let a person die if they could possibly get a plane from anywhere. And there was no plane. And all of a sudden, who should come to the door but Neville Shute, the author who wrote A Town Like Alice, and On the Beach, and quite a lot of other things he wrote. And he said to Les, what in the dickens is wrong with you two? He said, I've never seen faces as long as in my life. And Les said, Neville, there's a boy we can't bring in, we haven't a plane to go out for him. And he said, there is no way that we can save him. And Neville said to him, what's wrong with my plane? And Les said, you wouldn't. He said to Laurie, go and get your things together. And he said, I'll see to the plane. And he said, we'll take off as soon as we can. So it was right out on the Gulf of Carpentaria. And it took, I suppose, about 4 hours or 5 hours to get there. And by the time they got there, it was 6 o'clock and the DCA wouldn't allow them to fly. So Laurie saw his patient and he said he shuddered. He said, there's no way in the world that I can get this boy to treatment in time to save his life. Anyway, that night, Neville Shute and Laurie and Jimmy Edwards and the other two, that stockman was so out of it, he didn't join in at all, but the other stockman was there, and Jimmy Edwards told them this story, and it ended up by being the story of A Town Like Alice. And Jimmy Edwards was the prisoner of war who was pictured in A Town Like Alice, and which was taken by Peter Finch, as a matter of fact, in the movie that was made out of it. So the next morning, they got back in the plane, and Laurie had had the ankle made as comfortable as he possibly could. And he took him to the hospital, and I think it was Dr. Ben who attended to him. And he said to Laurie, "Oh, you've brought me something that," he said, "I don't know how this is going to go." And anyway, they saved the boy, they saved his ankle, and they had him on his feet within a couple of months. It was so badly damaged, though, it took nearly 2 months to heal it. And when Neville came back to the ambulance, Les said to him, "Neville, how much do I owe you for it?" And he said, "Les, put it down to experience." And he did that whole job, which took him a day and a half and about $1,000 or more, £1,000 it was then, or more, to take his plane over. So about 12 weeks or so after, up comes a parcel for both Les and Laurie. And when they opened it, they saw it was an edition of A Town Like Alice. And it was signed by Neville and saying how much he enjoyed the experience he had in the aerial ambulance. So at the end of that day, they still never had a plane of their own. And Neville said to him, "No matter where it's to go or what you've got to do, Les, get in touch with me and I'll bring my plane up to do it for you." And I think really that was living, that was sharing with the whole of the North Queensland so that they wouldn't be without the plane anymore. Another one was they still didn't have the plane. It was still, they had no money then. Les and Laurie used to scrounge money from anywhere they could get it to put in their kitty to buy the next plane. And this day there was it was an epidemic of polio that was in Georgetown, and there were 5 patients there, and they all had to be brought in. And they did get a plane. Now, this was before the cyclone. At 97, your memory fades a little bit. And when they went to land, they couldn't land on the tarmac because there was no tarmac in Georgetown. And so Don Ludby decided to land in the main street. And when they were taxiing in to come to an end, there was just not enough room in the main street for the whole plane to land. And they tore off part of one of the wings. Here were these 5 very, very ill people. 3 of them, by the way, were children. And so Les said to Don Ludby, "I don't know how we can't get out with the plane as it is." So Laurie was brought up on a farm, and he was brought up to be practical. And he then made it so that he went down into the river, to the Georgetown River, and he got some lawyer cane, and he got the exact measurements, because he had to make it the end of the tip of the wing, and it had to be exactly the same shape as the other side, exactly the same thickness and exactly the same filling. So it took him all night, took him and Don Ludby, the pilot, all night, and they made this piece, and they did it right straight onto the plane. And when as they put it up, they had to bandage it with 3-inch bandages, and then soak it with what they called aeroplane, like a goo. It was there is a word for it, and I might remember it by the end of it. They had to paint this with this glue and let it dry, and then paint it, and then bandage it again and paint it and let it dry. And they did that 4 times until they had it the right thickness for the other side of the plane. And they ended up by putting the whole 5. It was a 6-seater plane, and there was Laurie and 5 patients. So nobody was even able to come with them. And they took off. They had moved it they'd taken it on the road by all these men pulling it into the right position so that they could take off. And they took off from the main street again and went back to Cairns. And the 5 patients were in the hospital as fast as they could be taken there. And they had just had another call from Iron Range to say that they had 2 more polio patients there. And the pilot said to Laurie, "Are you prepared to fly back with me?" And the DCA said, "Hey, wait a minute. And they came out, and their inspectors inspected it, and they found they couldn't fault the plane, and they let them take off. They passed it for flying, and they got almost to Iron Range, and they found they couldn't land on Iron Range because the runway there that they usually used was all full of ant beds and the roots of trees. So I think that was Neville Willis that was on that one. And Neville said to Laurie, I can't land, and I haven't got enough petrol to go to go to the next station. I can't land anywhere. And Laurie said, I think it was Rotherham Park was the nearest one to it. And he said to Laurie, if you're going to take the risk with me, he said, if I get high enough, I can taxi down. And they got within, and they saw Rotherham Park station. And Neville said, I don't know really if we can get high enough to come in, but he said, if you're willing, he said, I'm willing to try it. So there was nothing else. They either had to crash or taxi in the next station. So they got over the top of Rotherham Park, and Neville says, well, here goes Laurie, we're on the way down. And they could see the station, and Neville knew he could taxi to somewhere near the station. And he just said, it's up to you and I to pray now that we'll get far enough. And they got above the station and came in on a wing and a prayer. And they landed at Rotherham Park and filled up and went back to Iron Range and got the other 2 polio patients and took them to Cairns. Was that all right?
Yeah, it's lovely. You had enough?
Well, there's 3 stories.
Yeah. What about if we have a